I've been planning this one for a while now because it would be a crime to pass this up. The timing couldn't be any better, right? But yeah, this one is a bit interesting since, while I'm sure we've all heard the same things, made by Capcom, it's a DMC clone, and this is maybe where a lot of future mechanics came from. So quite a bit going on it sounds like, so let's find out just how true that really is. This is combat overview. Here we go over the general controls, the main mechanics, and who or what we use them on, and then seeing how it all comes together. Got our basic whip attacks. Once upgraded, it'll extend its combo, launching enemies by the end of it. Don't get your hopes up because there's no jump to follow them or any kind of juggle system here. You can hold attack to charge it up, which gives it more range and deals more damage, but other than that, nothing too crazy. There's no delays or directional attacks like we've had since DMC 1. You can grab with your whip though. Mash and grab again will pummel them over and over, keeping hit nearby enemies with this. Or you can toss them instead for some far off crowd control. If fully charged, your grab will instead do this continuous crowd control spin. And I've tried, but you can't grab launched or floored enemies, so it only works on whoever is standing, pretty much. If you spin the left thumbstick and then attack, you do this twirl. Gets those enemies off you and even blocks projectiles, which is pretty neat. Not only that, but you can swap forms on the fly. There's Pumpkin King, has this flamethrower attack for some light damage over time, and this explosive AoE dealing some solid damage. Limited use though, so you won't be seeing this a whole lot. And Santa Jack, who can toss out presents. Kind of a trap thing going on with this one. Can cycle 3 different present types, one to stun, one to de-aggro, and one to freeze enemies. 2 of them are pretty similar. You can only toss out a few of these at a time, so you need to let them go off on their own, or you can detonate them yourself. Again, pretty neat, but you won't use these much at all. You're just going to use the Soul Robber. Onto defense, you got some forward flips that look oddly similar to Bayonetta, but trust me, it's nowhere near as useful. Just gets you from point A to point B. That's it. Looking at the HUD, got pumpkins for health, and yeah, that's pretty much it as well. No other meters to work with, no devil trigger or other main or sub weapons to swap between. Pretty bare bones. And surprisingly, we have a taunt. It will instantly power up your whip, so you don't need to hunker down to charge it, which is nice. And just like Onimusha, it'll aggro nearby enemies. So there's a bit of risk reward to it. Hey, they even drop more souls too if you defeat them while they're powered up. Speaking of souls, we can spend them on some upgrades, which are pretty straightforward too. No new moves or other weapons to get, just vials for heals on the go, permanent health increase, and can better your forms with each level you buy. When it comes to enemies, we got skeletons who are the basic grunts. Don't really put up much of a fight, so do whatever to them. There's ghosts, and with each hit you land, it'll back off further and further away out of your reach. So it's best to grab and pummel them instead. Some larger guys with clubs, what you can do is toss them, having them drop their weapon, which you can grab and use for yourself. And that's really it. Very small enemy pool to deal with, so it does get a bit repetitive at times. And when it comes to bosses, they're okay. Gotta dodge this giant spider's attack. Once left open, you can hit their back, which sends out a crowd of little ones for you to chase down to deal actual damage. You'll fight this same exact boss later on, just recolored. The scientist, get behind him to pull off his cap, then you gotta toss a different brain at him from the front while avoiding his traps. Get to fight Lock, Shock, and Barrel by themselves. Each one is a separate boss fight throughout the game, and the fights are all the same. They'll run around as you clear out little enemies so you can catch them. Then you gotta fight all 3 at once, dealing with all their patterns. So they get reused quite a bit too. And of course we fight Oogie. Gotta avoid his traps from turrets and bladed walls. Then bombs show up too, and when the moment's right, toss one into him. Again, this one's pretty similar to the evil scientist. Now his final form has you run around smacking his ankles while dodging projectiles so you can go for the face, Tower Knight style. Yeah, just like the enemies, the bosses are pretty simple and reused quite a bit. But there is something pretty different here that I enjoyed. So as you fight bosses, they'll drop notes. Collect enough to fill up this meter to start this rhythm game. The better you do here will have you do a stronger attack afterwards. So it combines the musical aspect of the movie into an actual game mechanic, which is a pretty smart idea. And that's Nightmare Before Christmas, Oogie's Revenge. Yeah, just like most tie-in action games on the PS2, it's pretty basic. It does have a lot of great nods for the fans though. Get to see familiar faces, visit those key areas from the movies, plus some new ones to expand the world a tiny bit. And of course it has those classic songs show up too. But when looking at its gameplay only, it's pretty meh. Most times it's a lot of downtime doing these fetch quests. There's even a chapter all about running around finding ornaments. So pacing is pretty slow, not really about the action bits. The game has you revisit the same few areas most of the time. And the whole thing about it being a DMC clone is kind of a stretch. It does have a rating system, but it's definitely not like DMC since you're not penalized for mashing. There isn't this expansive move list to experiment with. Not to mention it doesn't have the basic that DMC is built on, like launchers leading into air juggles or stingers. So it makes sense why you're allowed to spam since that's all you have. It does have a taunt to aggro, but that's been a thing since Onimusha. Has a similar dodge to Bayonetta, even has a different animation on the third flip, but it's just for some visual flair. Berserk actually did this too the same year as Nightmare, and it actually put some end lag on that third dodge so you won't mash those out. Just like Bayonetta did years later, so you won't try to spam witch time for free. There's a leash grab, but that's been a thing since Zoe 2 and a bunch of other action games. So yeah, it's not this origin point for the action genre or for DMC. I would give a good chunk of that credit to Onimusha Warlords, and I definitely wouldn't call it a DMC clone either. Has very tiny similarities, sure, but nothing too crazy. If you really want a DMC clone with juggles, devil trigger, on the fly weapon swapping, using different guns and weapons, then check out Evil Dead Regeneration. That game has a bit more going on there.